Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last part of today's session. So, in the previous sessions, we had discussed Naxalism in India. We understood the linkages between development and extremism. We understood the spread and evolution of Naxalism and how India is countering Naxalism. Now, let's come to the last part of the discussion and talk about the security measures, the offensive operations carried out by Indian forces to target and weaken Naxalism. This understanding will also be relevant when you're writing an answer regarding India's approach to fight Naxalism. Now that we know the development schemes, the security related schemes and initiatives, let's focus on those security forces and agencies which are involved in the operation. What exactly are they doing? What measures are they adopting? What strategies are they adopting? As we discussed, the primary anti Naxal force of the center is the CRPF, the Central Reserve Police Force. The CRPF, along with few other central armed police forces, including few battalions of BSF, ITBP, and SSB, they have been deployed in these Naxal areas to assist the state police in their anti-Naxal operations. They are primarily involved in counter-insurgency operations in these remote forested areas which are infested by Naxals. This is where our state police forces, with the support of the central forces, are conducting their counter-insurgency operations. The CRPF has raised a special force called the Cobra that specializes in jungle warfare. A special force is an elite unit. It's an elite unit of commandos that has been raised within the CRPF. It's called the Cobra Battalion. It stands for Commando Battalion for Resolute Action. All right, it's an acronym. It stands for Commando Battalion for Resolute Action. So this elite special force unit of CRPF specializes in jungle warfare. These special force commandos have received specialized training from the Indian Army. The Indian Army has a dedicated jungle warfare school. So here the commandos are trained very similar to how the special forces of Indian Army are trained. The para commandos of Indian Army, even they receive jungle warfare training. Similar to that, on those lines, the CRPF commandos of Cobra are also trained by the Indian Army itself. They are given highly specialized weapons and equipment. That is what defines a special force. Not every soldier can make it into a special force unit. Only the best of the best soldiers who have the highest physical fitness and, more importantly, the best mental capabilities. Because mental toughness is crucial to be a commando. So after careful scrutiny, these soldiers are recruited into these elite special force units. They are put through rigorous training, extremely rigorous training, where they're trained to operate independently. Special forces, they operate in small units. They don't operate in large numbers. They operate in very small units. And they are very effective in precision operations, in targeted surgical operations. So these elite trained commandos who are given special equipment, they're given special body armor to protect themselves. They will have GPS navigation kits, high-end communication kits, satellite phones. They even have access to drones if required for surveillance and for monitoring the area. Right? They'll have specialized vehicles that can withstand the attack of Naxals, the ambush attacks. Because Naxals, they often carry out IED explosions. Naxals are specialists in building IED bombs. IED stands for improvised explosive device. Usually these bombs are activated on trigger, either when someone steps on it or a vehicle passes over it, or they can be remotely activated as well. So Naxals, they place IED bombs on the routes where the security forces are passing through, under the roads, under the bridges, on the sides of the roads where the convoy will pass through. That is where they place the IED bombs and explode them in a surprise attack. Once the convoy is attacked, some are injured, some are killed, then they will ambush the site. The Naxals will surround the target and they will open fire against the security forces. So Naxals can be very brutal in their attacks. They don't just detonate the bombs, they will ambush the troops following the explosion and they will kill indiscriminately. They will steal the weapons as well. After killing the soldiers and the security officers, they will steal weapons from them. They are also known to booby trap the bodies of the martyrs. Do you know what's a booby trap? A booby trap is where bombs are hidden and the reinforcements which come in, right, they will also be targeted. Usually what they do is they take the dead bodies, they place the IEDs under the dead bodies or inside them as well, because they know that reinforcements will come after the attack to pick up the injured and the dead. So when the new troops come in, when they lift the body, immediately explosions will happen, killing the reinforcement troops as well. That is how brutal Naxals can be. They booby trap the bodies with bombs. The moment the bodies are picked up, right, the bombs will explode. Either it is placed under the bodies or sometimes they cut open the bodies and place it inside. And reinforcements, when they come, when they don't pay attention and they pick up the body, the bombs will go off again. So they're known for such surprise attacks where they try to indiscriminately kill the security forces. So that is why you need special force units like Cobra, which also specialize in jungle warfare. So CRPF leads these counterinsurgency operations with help from the state police forces. These are coordinated operations. As I told you, the Naxal affected states, they have their own anti-Naxal forces, which are also well trained and quite well equipped. And they work in coordination with CRPF, who supplement their resources. And together, they lead the joint operations. One major operation that was carried out by India was Operation Green Hunt, launched by the then Manmohan Singh government, which went on until 2012. This was largely a covert operation, meaning it was secret. It has not been revealed till date. The government does not acknowledge that such an operation happened. But there have been credible media reports, investigative reports, which has shown that a coordinated multi-state operation was carried out for 2 to 3 years, targeting the Naxal leadership and the Naxal camps, through which success was achieved by Indian forces. This name is not given by the government, by the security forces. Government denies such an operation happened. This name was given by the media. It's an unofficial name. They call it Operation Green Hunt. It's a reference to the coordinated multi-state operations that went on for 3 years, through which Naxals were targeted. The top leadership, through specific intelligence, targeted operations were carried out to neutralize and eliminate many top and mid-level leaders and commanders. So according to experts, these operations were very effective. That's why after 2012, we see a major decline in Naxalism. Is that clear? Once the Prime Minister labeled Naxalism as the biggest internal threat, along with the development measures, targeted security operations were also launched. And one major operation was this unofficial covert operation called Operation Green Hunt. Then state forces also have taken their own initiatives. Here, Andhra Pradesh stands out as an example. It established one of the first special force units at the state level called the Greyhounds. In 1980s, the Greyhounds of Andhra Police played a critical role in decimating the PWG. Remember earlier I told you that People's War Group, which operated in Andhra, Maharashtra, Odisha belt, was substantially weakened and almost wiped out in 1990s by the Andhra Police. This success is credited to the strategy of the Andhra Pradesh Police and a special force unit, a commando unit called the Greyhounds. Andhra Pradesh became one of the first states in India to have a dedicated special force that was trained in jungle warfare. What they did was, the senior leadership of Andhra Pradesh police, the senior IPS officers, they came out with a unique strategy. They realized that bringing outside forces will not help, because forces from other parts of the state or other parts of the country, they may not have the local knowledge, they may not have the motivation to fight such a prolonged conflict. Now imagine if CRPF troops from, let's say there will be Jawans from UP, Karnataka, Rajasthan, Haryana, if they are deployed in Chhattisgarh and Odisha, they will not know the local terrain and geography. They will not understand the local tribal language and tribal customs. Without that, they can't build an intelligence network to generate intelligence. Right? They don't understand local factors, local sensitivities. And they will not have a higher motivation to fight the war, because they're disconnected from the war. For them, it's an outside conflict. Of course, they will be professional forces, right? We're not questioning their integrity. It's just that they're not connected with it. Personally, they haven't suffered losses from Naxals. So the Andhra Pradesh police, their leadership recognized these gaps and they came out with a new strategy. What they did was, they ensured that the recruits into greyhounds, they would be the local youth. As much as possible, they would recruit from the local population itself, from the Naxal affected districts and villages. Because due to Naxalism, the local youth, they would have lost their education opportunities, economy would have been destroyed, their families would have been impacted. Naxals might have targeted their family members as well by labeling them as police informants. So they will have a personal loss, a personal grudge against Naxals. So this personal resentment was tapped by the Andhra police. This is very critical in a conflict zone. They primarily recruited the local youth who were personally affected by Naxal violence. As it had continued for decades, Naxalism had affected the local youth, and those who were willing to fight, they were given priority in recruitment because they have a stronger urge to defeat Naxalism. This war is personal for them. They're not just fighting for the security forces and the government of India, they're fighting for themselves, for their own people. This is any day a stronger motivation, which is essential in such a prolonged conflict. So local youth affected by Naxalism were recruited and they were given highly specialized training by the Indian Army. The Andhra Pradesh police dedicated more funds, tied up with the Indian Army, and got them training, commando training at the Jungle Warfare School of the Indian Army. They procured advanced weapons for them. Imagine, this was in 1980s when no other state police had done this. They got them the best commando training, trained them in jungle warfare, gave them further motivation and gave better weapons, better protection and equipment, and even better compensation. Because they're risking their lives for the country, they deserve to be compensated better. The money plays a big role in motivation. Their salaries were increased. If they get injured or killed, they would get a higher compensation. So they're sure that their family will be taken care of by the government. So all these measures were taken while raising the greyhounds. And this became a lethal force of Andhra police in targeting the PWG. Within few years, they destroyed PWG in the Eastern Ghats. From Tirupati all the way till the Odisha border, across the forest belt of Andhra and Telangana, they hunted PWG with great efficiency. In fact, their success is still studied. It's a case study even today in police schools and commando schools around the world, not just in India. Even foreign forces which are involved in counterinsurgency operations, they study the model of greyhounds, the strategies, the tactics they adopted in jungle warfare. Now, if you clear this exam, become an IPS officer, right? You'll go to training in Hyderabad for at the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel National Police Academy. So IPS probationers also have a case study on greyhounds. the success of greyhounds, how Andhra police played a role in decimating the PWG. Many foreign special forces as well, which deal with jungle warfare, they study the success model of greyhounds. So this was a tremendous strategy of the Andhra Pradesh police. Now the force is divided between Andhra and Telangana. Obviously, the state was bifurcated later. So greyhounds also has been divided between the Andhra Pradesh police and Telangana police. This model is being followed by other states as well. Now, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, they've all raised their own special forces. Like Chhattisgarh has raised a jungle for warfare commando unit called Black Panther. Odisha police also have their own special commando unit which specializes in jungle warfare and deals with anti-Naxal operations. They're all modeled on the greyhounds of Andhra Pradesh. So such local strategies by the states are also equally important. Apart from these security forces which lead the operations, the intelligence agencies also play a big role. The Intelligence Bureau plays a critical role in collecting human intelligence and technical intelligence. IB is a domestic intelligence agency responsible for domestic operations in the country. The IB has state level subsidiaries as well. The state police will also have their state intelligence bureaus. They will coordinate with each other to build a local informant network. In the world of intelligence operations, HUMINT or human intelligence is very crucial, where human assets are cultivated in the targeted groups. Human assets are placed inside these groups to generate valuable, reliable piece of intelligence. Is that clear? Now, what do you mean by human assets? It means IB will cultivate a set of agents, informants, who will infiltrate that organization. They will join that group, become a member as well, without raising suspicion. Essentially, they'll function as double agents. Or IB will tap a existing Naxal, identify some weakness, and turn them towards our side, force them to work for the IB and the government. So while being a Naxal, some of them, especially in the top and mid leadership, they would be turned and they would be forced by the IB to work for us and pass on information to us. So the inputs they provide, right, these are human sources. This intelligence is very reliable. Is that clear? This is one aspect of intelligence collection. Intelligence agencies, they infiltrate the terror groups, the insurgent groups by planting these agents. Either they will plant their own agents who will join those groups without raising suspicion, or existing insurgents, terrorists are pressurized, right? They exploit their weaknesses and they force them to work for the intelligence agencies. Essentially, they're turned into double agents. They will work for the extremists as well without raising any doubt, any suspicion, while passing on information secretly to our intelligence agencies, so that we are aware of their plans, we are aware of their strategies. So based on this specific intelligence, targeted operations can be conducted. Along with human intelligence, technical intelligence is also very valuable. This is generated through interception, by intercepting phone calls, landline phones, mobile phones, intercepting any internet communication, right? It could be messages, social media exchanges. Today, intelligence agencies have great ability to carry out technical interception. So IB has those capabilities. It will not only generate human intelligence by building a network of informants, right? It will generate that human source intelligence. It will also generate technical intelligence through interception. And there's another agency called NTRO, National Technical Research Organization. This is a premier technical intelligence agency of India. It was established after the Kargil War. After Kargil War, many deficiencies were identified in our security architecture. A lot of security reforms were introduced. And one new agency was created called NTRO, National Technical Research Organization. It was recommended by various committees as well that were set up after the Kargil conflict. So NTRO was set up under RAW, the Research and Analysis Wing, which is the Foreign Intelligence Agency of India. For many years, NTRO continued to function under RAW as the Technical Intelligence Wing of RAW. But recently, given the importance of technical intelligence, NTRO has been separated from RAW and it directly works under the National Security Advisor. It's brought under National Security Council, which is headed by the National Security Advisor of India. So NTRO has interception capabilities. It can intercept any kind of communication, not just in India, but abroad as well. It can intercept the whole internet traffic. It can intercept any electronic exchange of information being done through computers and mobile phones. It can intercept phone calls, messages, emails, social media interactions, even satellite phone calls, right? Every such communication can be intercepted by NTRO. Even the internet carried through submarine cables, undersea cables, can be intercepted by NTRO. So NTRO has become this premier technical intelligence agency specializing in electronic interception. So it was under RAW for many years. Recently, it was separated and brought directly under the National Security Advisor. So agencies like NTRO IB play a key role in generating valuable intelligence, and they work with the state intelligence bureaus. So this helps in intelligence-led counter-insurgency operations. This will be more effective. Instead of conducting blind operations, right, without adequate information, by generating real-time intelligence, actionable intelligence, we can carry out specific targeted operations to hit some top leaders of the Naxals, to cut their financing routes, to target their base camps, to cut their weapon supply. Such specific operations based on intelligence will give better results. It will be more effective. So this has been a strategy which has been followed over the last couple of decades. Then, what about Indian Army and Indian Air Force? Are they involved in this fight against Naxals? That is the question. I did mention about Indian Army, but now I'll mention about Indian Air Force as well. Are they involved in fighting Naxals? No. They have no direct combat role in fighting Naxals. Subsequent governments have made a conscious decision to not use armed forces of India to target Naxals. So Indian Army, Indian Air Force, they are not deployed in a combat role, meaning they can't engage the Naxals directly. Is that clear? I'll explain why. But however, Indian Army, Indian Air Force are involved in an indirect capacity. They are involved in a non-combat role. They are given a supporting role. Indian Army is training the security forces in jungle warfare. The Cobra Battalion of CRPF, the Special Force Units of State Police Forces, they're all trained in jungle warfare by Indian Army. So Indian Army is giving training, but Indian Army itself is not directly involved in the fight. Indian Air Force is providing aerial support. It has deployed helicopters to assist the forces, to help in their mobility, in their deployment, to carry out casualty evacuation or CAS-evac. Because during encounters, our forces might get injured or killed. They will have to be immediately evacuated for medical attention, right? So Indian Air Force is providing helicopters. We are deploying drones and satellites as well in this fight against Naxals. Agencies like NTRO are deploying drones and satellites for surveillance, for monitoring the conflict zone, to assist the operations from the air. So such equipment is being deployed, high-end equipment. But Indian Air Force is providing helicopters only for transportation. That's it. Indian Air Force will not directly fight the Naxals. In fact, it has been strictly instructed to not engage Naxals in a direct combat. So it's a non-combat role. It's only a support role given for the armed forces. In fact, the Garud commandos of the Indian Air Force who are stationed on these helicopters, they cannot fire against Naxals. The Garud is a special force of Indian Air Force. So a couple of Garud commandos are deployed on these helicopters when the security forces are being transported. But their role is only to defend the helicopter. If Naxals directly attack our helicopters, when there's a threat to the helicopter itself, that is when Garuds will engage the Naxals. Or else, they are prohibited from engaging the Naxals. They cannot open fire. We will not conduct any aerial strikes or air strikes against the Naxals. This is a deliberate, conscious decision made by the government, because if you deploy armed forces, against an internal threat, it could lead to large-scale collateral damage. It could lead to large-scale human rights violations. Is that clear? Because armed forces are different in their training, in their recruitment, in their mindset compared to our police forces and paramilitary forces. The armed forces are meant to fight the external enemy. They are meant to fight wars, external wars, to defend India's integrity and sovereignty. So the armed forces which are under the defense ministry, the army, navy, air force, right? They're meant to fight external wars. They are trained to kill. That is their first option. Using maximum force is the first option of the armed forces. That is how they are trained. That is how they are built. That is the kind of equipment they carry as well. Look at the Indian Army. It will have missiles, rockets, battle tanks, artillery guns. They can all cause extensive damage. Look at Indian Air Force or even Indian Navy for that matter, right? The kind of assets they have, from fighter jets to armed helicopters, they can all inflict heavy damage and serious damage. If you use such heavily equipped armed forces which are trained to kill, for them killing is the first option, right? If such forces are used in an internal role to fight your own citizens, chances are high that the collateral damage will be very high. Human rights violations might occur, and this will perpetuate the cycle of violence. It will create more resentment. Locals will hate the forces. The divide will increase between locals and the state, and extremists will get more support. Look at what is happening in Gaza. Israeli armed forces, which are well equipped and trained to use lethal force, they are using maximum force. As a result, they are killing civilians as well, along with Hamas terrorists. That is what creates the uproar that Israel is committing human rights violations and committing a genocide. And India doesn't want that. We can't be seen to be killing our own citizens on a large scale, right? So that is why a conscious decision has been made to not use Indian armed forces against Naxals. It's an internal problem. It's a domestic problem. Naxals are largely homegrown. They have very limited external support. So it is better we fight Naxals with police and paramilitary forces. Your police forces are more sensitized. In case of your police, they may not have the right training and right weapons and equipment, but they are more sensitized, meaning they use force as a last resort. Take your state police or city police, for example, right? They don't carry guns with them usually, right? They're just carrying lathis and other basic equipment, non-lethal equipment, and they use force as a last resort, only as the last option. But state police alone is also not enough to fight Naxals. That's why paramilitary forces are brought in. That's why state police raise special anti-Naxal forces. So they're adequately equipped. Your paramilitary is somewhere in between. Your Central Armed Police Forces, the CAPFs, they are the paramilitary forces of India. They are like a combination of your police and your armed force. They bring the best of both. They have better training and equipment like the armed forces. At the same time, they are sensitized like the police forces. So that is why CRPF, some units of BSF, ITBP, SSB, They are used to supplement the state police because they are more sensitized. They will use only adequate force, minimal force that is needed. They have better training, better equipment and weapons with minimal usage of force. So this will minimize the collateral damage for civilians. It will minimize human right violations. And as a result, it will help us win the war quickly. Now, some of you might ask a question. Then, sir, how come Indian Army is involved in counter-terror, counter-insurgency operations in Jammu and Kashmir? How come Indian Army is involved in these operations in Northeast India? Correct. You're absolutely right. If you're asking that question, you are right. Indian Army is used in an internal role in Jammu and Kashmir and in Northeast India. But those circumstances are different. Because in case of J&K and Northeast India, there is cross-border support for terrorists and insurgents. Across the border, Pakistan and others like Bangladesh, Myanmar, China, they are giving direct support to these insurgents and terrorists from across the border. There are terror camps present across the border. The terrorists are infiltrating and posing a threat to our sovereignty and integrity. Foreign state agencies like Pakistan's ISI, Chinese intelligence, before Bangladeshi state agencies as well, they used to provide direct support to insurgent and terror groups in Northeast India and in Jammu and Kashmir. So there the question is very different. The challenge is different. There is a much more serious threat to our integrity and sovereignty. There is external support and cross-border factors. That is why Indian Army is deployed. The justification is that Indian Army is needed to ensure the sovereignty and integrity of the nation. So that is why Indian Army is directly used in counter-insurgency, counter-terror operations in J&K and also in Northeast India, but not to fight Naxals. Is that clear? In case of Naxalism, the region is not a border region. The cross-border support is very limited. Naxals are largely homegrown domestic group with a genuine root cause, right? So given these factors, Indian governments have decided to not use the armed forces in a combat role. So Indian Army, Indian Air Force have no direct combat role in fighting Naxalism. They only have a non-combat role. Indian Army provides training in jungle warfare and other support services. Indian Air Force provides helicopters and aerial surveillance to aid the security forces. They will not directly engage in combat with Naxals. Understood? This is very important. So this is how India has been fighting Naxalism over the last few years. Now the Modi government, under the National Action Policy and Plan, has adopted a security doctrine as well. In 2017, the Home Ministry announced a security doctrine called the Samadhan Doctrine. Samadhan is an acronym again. The word Samadhan, it's an acronym. You can expand each letter. This is like a vision or a guideline for our security forces which are fighting Naxalism. It's a guideline for state governments, for state police, for intelligence agencies, and even the Central Armed Police Forces. So Samadhan basically stands for smart leadership. S for smart leadership, meaning the center is expecting the state governments to take the leadership to fight Naxalism. States are being encouraged to own this war because it's a primary responsibility of the state police to deal with this threat. This is mainly an internal security problem. So states are encouraged to take ownership, to display that proactive leadership at the state level to fight Naxals. That is S for smart leadership by the states. A for aggressive strategy, meaning our forces will not be complacent. They'll not be defensive. They will adopt aggressive strategies wherever necessary to counter Naxals. They will use modern technology. They will use modern weapons and equipment to target the Naxals. If required, we'll use helicopters, drones, satellites. We will fortify the police stations and will adopt proactive strategies to hunt Naxals in the forested areas. So A for aggressive strategy. Forces will not be defensive, right? They'll not simply react after the attacks have happened, Rather, they will proactively hunt the Naxals through an aggressive strategy. M for motivation and training, which we have already studied. We will provide the best training possible to our forces fighting Naxals. Indian Army especially will train the forces in jungle warfare, will raise special force units like Cobra, Greyhounds, etc. Right? Will ensure that they have high motivation and the highest levels of training so that they can emerge victorious in this jungle war. It's not easy to fight a jungle war because the terrain itself becomes the enemy. The forest, the jungles become the enemy apart from the Naxals. So our forces have to be well trained. They should be able to sustain themselves in forested areas. They should be able to operate on their own. They should retain their high morale and motivation. And this all comes down to motivation and training. A for actionable intelligence. The operations will be led by intelligence, meaning we will generate real-time intelligence which is actionable, on which we can act. Because sometimes intelligence inputs can be very vague, very broad. So such vague intelligence inputs are not useful. Every day intelligence agencies get thousands of inputs, and not every piece of information is useful to launch targeted operations. So the focus here is to generate real-time actionable intelligence, which is very specific. We should know exactly where they are planning attacks, where they are hiding, who are the leaders, where are they present right now, who are they communicating with, where are they raising funds and weapons. Such specific real-time information is needed, and this can be done only by having large-scale intelligence operations through technical interception, right, through electronic interception, through satellite monitoring, and as well as human intelligence sources. Through all these sources, information has to be generated, which helps in targeted operations. D for dashboard based KPIs and KRAs. This is basically a performance tracker. Those who are in the corporate world, those who are working in private companies or even in government entities, you would have heard about KPIs and KRAs. KPI is key performance indicator. KRA is key result area. See, in any task that we do, we have to measure our progress to see where we stand, right? That is what generates the feedback. That's how we'll get to know whether we are performing well or not. And based on that feedback, you can carry out a course correction to improve your strategy and preparedness. This is true for any exercise. In private companies, like for example, in IT firms, tracking KPIs, KRAs is common practice. It's a management practice. Today, it's being used in the government as well, in public sector organizations, in government ministries. What they do is, for any initiative, they keep track of the performance regularly. They identify few measurable targets and indicators, which are KPIs. They'll identify the key result areas where they want to achieve the desired results, and they will collect the data regularly and update the data. This data is projected on a dashboard. Dashboard is basically a wall, a TV screen, right, or even a web page where you're projecting all the data in a easily understandable manner. I mean, the moment you look at the wall, the moment you look at the dashboard, you get to know the key indicators, the KPIs and the KRAs. So you will easily understand the performance, the progress. This gives you the feedback to make a course correction. Now, I'm sure some of you may not have understood this. Let me simplify it. I'll give you a better example. Let's say you are UPSC aspirants, right? What is your goal? Your goal is to crack this exam. You want to clear the exam, become an IAS officer, IPS, IFS officer. Now, this is your goal. It's a 1.5 to 2 year target. Now, you need to have a performance management and a performance measurement system in place. Or else, how will you know where you stand in this competition? There are thousands of aspirants preparing seriously for the exam. How can you improve yourself? Just by attending classes, reading newspapers, you won't be able to clear this exam. right? You need a mechanism through which you can track your key performance indicator and your result areas. How can you do this? You can do this very easily. Let's say you create a dashboard. You bring a chart, put it on your wall. That becomes your dashboard. It could be a piece of paper, just a cardboard attached on your wall, right? Or a on virtual dashboard that you create on a web page. Here you log your key indicators. What can be the key indicators? Am I attending all the classes? What's my attendance? Daily, weekly, monthly attendance. That's a KPI. Am I reading newspaper every day? Another KPI. Am I revising everything? Weekly, monthly revisions, are they happening? Am I practicing tests? Am I practicing answer writing? These are your KPIs. This is what will help you crack the exam. If you identify this and update the sheet on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly, monthly basis, tomorrow you will get to know where you stand. Your result area is nothing but your score in the practice tests, your weekly test, your test series, the answer writing test you take, what marks are you getting? That is your result area. If you keep track of this data and project the data on a dashboard, on a wall, on a sheet, the moment you look at the table or the chart, you'll get to know what is your performance. If your attendance is poor, if you're not consistent in newspaper reading, if you're not attending all webinars, if you're not practicing tests and scoring well, your KPIs, KRAs will be low. It's a clear indication that your performance is not on track. So 2-3 months later, you see the dashboard, then you get a shock that I'm lagging behind, my syllabus is not completed, that I'm not doing all the tasks. So this is a feedback you get based on which you can course correct. You can become more serious in your preparation, address those areas where you're weak. You can do this subject wise as well. So that is nothing but dashboard based management. You have this in your car as well. In your cars, there is something called a dashboard, right? Behind your steering wheel. It's nothing but a display of the KPI and KRA of your car. The moment you look at the dashboard, one glance is enough to get to know what speed the vehicle is traveling in. What is the RPM? What is the fuel level, the time, the temperature, right? These are the KPIs and KRAs displayed on your car dashboard. So this is a management practice which is used in organizations, companies, government entities. Now this is used by Home Ministry as well to track Naxalism. How are we fighting Naxalism? How many districts are affected? How many attacks have happened? How many soldiers have we lost? How many weapons were stolen? How much funds were recovered? Right? How many Naxals have been killed? How many districts have been freed from Naxalism? All this data is captured as KPIs and KRAs and projected on a dashboard. So the moment the authorities look at it, Home Ministry officials, state police officials, and security forces, when they look at the dashboard, they know where they stand. They know what is the progress. This is a performance management technique which is adopted in fighting Naxalism as well. So D for dashboard-based KPIs and KRAs. H for harnessing advanced technology. As I was mentioning, using drones for better intelligence gathering, surveillance, GPS tracking, GPS navigation kits, night vision goggles to operate in the jungles even in the night time, using thermal imaging devices, satellites, putting trackers in weapons if they are stolen. Just put a simple GPS tracker in every weapon. If they are stolen, tomorrow you'll get to know where the Naxals are hiding, right? So such high-end technology can be used to improve our fight against Naxals, and that's exactly what India is doing. A for action plan for every theater, for every state, for every district. A different action plan will be needed because challenges are different. You can't have the same strategy in Odisha and in Chhattisgarh. Factors could be different. So at the state level, at the district level, we have to analyze the challenges, the security challenges, and accordingly design a customized plan for every theater. In security language, right? In security language, theater refers to a geographical area or a geographical region or a domain. Like, let's say for Navy, the maritime domain is a theater, right? For Army, let's say for Army and the Air Force, there is a Western theater focusing on Pakistan, a Northern Northeastern theater focusing on China. So in security language, when we say theater of conflict, it refers to a domain. It refers to a geographical area or a region. So to fight Naxalism, along with a broad national plan and state level plan, we need local plans at the district level, depending on local geography, local circumstances. So A for action plan for every theater, a customized plan, a separate plan for every theater so that our operations are more effective. Then finally, N for no access to financing. Because see, any conflict, any war, it's all about the money. It is always about the business. You hit the money channels, automatically you can bring conflicts and wars to an end. That's a harsh reality. Be it wars between two countries, be it a fight against a terror group or an insurgent war, every conflict is about the money. You cut the source of funding, cut the source of financing, automatically the conflict will end. You take Russia-Ukraine war. Why do you think Ukraine has managed to stand up against Russia and even push back Russia? It's because Ukraine got funds from Western countries. They gave billions of dollars in funds through which Ukraine could procure advanced equipment, and that's why it has been able to push back Russia. Why do you think Western countries are imposing sanctions, economic sanctions against Russia and Iran? Because they're cutting their financing. The moment the economy takes a hit, the money flow takes a hit, automatically it becomes a disadvantage to wage the war. The same holds good for terrorism and insurgency as well. Find out where they are getting funds from. Terror groups, insurgent groups will be involved in criminal activities. They will be working with criminal cartels, smuggling drugs, smuggling arms. They will be involved in money laundering, in smuggling fake currency notes. If you tackle these criminal elements, if you break the organized crime, automatically it will help in cutting financing as well. There are other routes through which Naxals might be raising funds, maybe through donations from sympathizers, maybe from foreign sources as well. They could be growing drugs on their own in the forested areas they control and trafficking it, smuggling it to other markets. They could have connections with arms cartels, arms trafficking groups from where they are procuring advanced weaponry, right? So it's important to identify those channels which connects organized crime, money laundering with terrorism and insurgency. That's why I told you at the beginning, these three are connected. Organized crime, money laundering, and terror financing. These three are interlinked. Most terror groups are involved in some or the other criminal activity. It could be cyber crimes as well, where they're extorting ransom, which is funding their terror activities. They could be involved in extortion, especially in Northeast India, even Naxals for that matter. They threaten the local industrialists, politicians, and businessmen, and they collect money from them. They collect ransoms from them. So that is a source of funding through extortion. They kidnap high-profile individuals and threaten them for money. They have to pay them every month, every week. That is a big source of funding. They might be growing drugs or smuggling drugs and weapons, getting a commission out of it, right? So breaking the criminal networks, the money laundering routes is critical to deny access to financing for terror and insurgent groups. So we have to enforce our laws against money laundering, against criminal activities. The Prevention of Money Laundering Act. This is the primary law against money laundering that we have. We have laws against organized criminal activities as well, especially against drug smuggling, drug trafficking. We have the NDPS Act, the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. So enforcing those laws, pushing our intelligence and law enforcement agencies to crack these criminal cartels and money laundering channels will help a long way in curbing financing to these extremist groups. So this is what Samadhan doctrine stands for. Every letter in this word stands for something. It's a guideline, it's a vision, a roadmap that Home Ministry has laid out for the state government, for the security forces and the intelligence agencies. So this is the doctrine being followed in our fight against Naxalism. Is that clear? Now, I would like to have a small discussion on the targets of Naxals. What do they target? What are their financing routes? How are they getting funds? And how are they sourcing weapons? This is something you should be familiar with. I have mentioned this briefly, but now let us have a separate discussion, a very small discussion, because I expect a question to be asked here, a means question. UPSC can ask you, what are the sources of funding and arms and weapons for Naxals, and what do they target? What are the primary targets of Naxals? What do they attack? And how are they raising funds for their operations? How are they sourcing weapons? 15 marks question. You have to talk about all the three. Now, can you tell me what do Naxals target? Now that I've explained everything, we are at the end of the chapter. So I hope you have understood everything. Now, based on the answer, I'll get to know whether you've understood or not. Can you tell me few examples of what targets will Naxals attack? Will they attack a city like Delhi, Mumbai? Will they attack five-star hotels? Or will they attack only security forces? You tell me. What are the primary targets? Good. Ravi says police stations. Himanshu says the state forces. Kola says the bureaucracy, the corrupt bureaucracy. Public places. Gaurav says public places. Gaurav, have you ever heard of a Naxal attack in a public place? Have you ever heard of a Naxal attack in a market, in a shopping mall, in a crowded area? Right? Have you heard about this? The answer is no. Naxals are very specific. They carefully choose their targets. They don't attack cities. They don't attack public places. That is not their agenda. It will not serve their agenda. Then what do they attack? They attack the state. What is the goal of Maoism? Go back to that. What did Mao Zedong say? The goal is to capture state power, to throw the state out. The resentment, the anger is against the state. So anything that represents the state becomes a target. Obviously, security forces are the primary target. The state police, local police stations, the central forces, right? Essentially, all the security forces involved in the fight against Naxalism, they are the primary target. They'll target police and police stations and the security camps, and they will ambush the security forces. Other than this, they will attack government officials, local politicians, even government offices present in these remote areas. Please understand, all Naxal attacks are carried out only in remote forested areas, only in their stronghold. Naxals don't venture out. That's why you don't see a Naxal attack in Bangalore or Mumbai or Delhi. Whereas Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, which are purely terrorist groups, they focus on cities, they focus on crowded places, they want to kill more civilians. But Naxals are different. You'll understand this in the next chapter when I discuss insurgency versus terrorism. You'll understand why I'm calling Naxals as insurgents, not as terrorists. Of course, Government of India has labeled them as terrorists. That's a different thing. But academically, Naxals are insurgents because of this reason. Their principles, their strategies are such that they don't attack cities, public places, and civilian population. Their attacks are focused on their stronghold areas, which are the remote jungles and forests of India, which they largely control. Their attacks are against our security forces. They kidnap and try to kill government officials as well, politicians, right? MLAs, MPs, local political leaders, government buildings and offices, and any public infrastructure created by the government. Even school buildings are attacked, water tanks, roads which are built, mobile towers which are established. This is targeted by Naxals. This exposes their hypocrisy as well. On one hand, they are claiming that government does not care about the people, it's not providing development, that's why they want to fight this war. If government acknowledges the failure and provides for development, they will target the infrastructure itself. That shows their hypocrisy. That shows that they don't care about the people. Their real interest is not about development. Their real interest is to exploit the development gap to turn the people against the state. Because what is their goal? Their goal is to capture state power, to form a communist state, to establish the future state. Is that clear? They attack school buildings. Can you believe that? If government builds a road or a bridge, they attack that because they don't want development. They don't want people to, move away from their support and start favoring the government. They will destroy mobile towers. They will destroy any public infrastructure. That is their target. Sometimes they can target civilians as well. Usually they don't attack civilians. Their main target is the state. But sometimes if they believe the civilian to be an informant, if they believe that a local villager is working for the intelligence agencies or the police, then they will kill civilians as well. If civilians don't give them support, right? If they don't give them shelter, funds and food, they could target civilians. But that is quite rare, because if they attack civilians regularly, what will happen? They might lose local support. Imagine if women and children are killed in a Naxal attack. Tomorrow, nobody will support the Naxals. The locals will hate them. Right? So Naxals are very careful. They mainly target the state, the government. As much as possible, they leave the civilians aside. That is why they don't hit public places. They don't bomb markets, crowded areas, or cities. Their attacks are limited to the forested areas, the stronghold areas where they can hit the state. Got it? So as much as possible, they don't attack civilians. But if they believe someone is an informant, if someone has betrayed them, not supported them, then they might kill civilians as well. They also target elections. They don't allow elections to happen. They threaten the electoral officers. They threaten the polling booths. They threaten the candidates as well to not contest. They threaten voters to not go and vote. Why? Because election is the representation of Indian democracy, the very constitution of India. Correct? So they are hitting at the foundation of Indian democracy. They don't allow elections. It's very difficult to conduct elections in Naxal area. If you don't believe me, watch the movie Newton by Rajkumar Rao. It beautifully depicts the challenges in holding elections in Naxal areas. Some of you might have seen it, right? So they target anything related to the state. There have been cases where they have kidnapped IAS, IPS officers. They have attacked IAS, IPS officers as well because they represent the state. I'm not telling this to scare you. I'm just telling you the reality. It is a challenging job, but it's a very critical role played by the government bureaucracy because they are at the forefront of this fight. So as IAS, IPS officers, if you get this opportunity, it's an incredible opportunity. Yes, there will be challenges, there will be threats, but it's a great opportunity to serve the nation because you're not only dealing with a security threat, you're focusing on the developmental aspects as well. That too in some of the remotest, backward areas of the country. Now, where are they getting the money from? They have survived for decades. More than 50 years, Naxalism has been active. How can it survive for so long without good funds, good financing? Obviously, they're raising money. How? One is through drugs. They grow drugs. or they force local farmers in the forested village areas to grow opium. There are many opium fields in Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, which are controlled by Naxals. This brings a lot of money for them, right? They smuggle and traffic the drugs. They work with organized criminal gangs. They build contacts with them. Organized criminal cartels from Pakistan, from Myanmar, or in the northeast of India. They will tie up with other insurgents and terror groups. They don't hesitate to form alliances. They will tie up with other terror groups and insurgents who might help them. So our intelligence agencies have detected Naxal contact with other groups like Lashkar-e-Toiba, LTT of Sri Lanka, mainly to source funds and weapons from them. LTT had great access to weapons because they work with arms trafficking cartels. There are a few global arms trafficking cartels that smuggle high-end advanced weapons. They're quite easily available if you have the money for it. So Naxals work with these groups. Groups like LTT, Lashkar-e-Toiba. They have had contacts with Ulfa and other northeast groups as well, with NSCN and others. Through all these contacts, through these networks, right, they raise funds. You can see how criminal activity is linked with money laundering and terror financing. The direct connection. They smuggle drugs and weapons for others. Let's say Lashkar-e-Toiba wants to smuggle a consignment of drugs and weapons to plan an attack in the country. You never know, Naxals might be involved in helping them, in giving logistical support, in smuggling the drugs and the weapons. And they get a commission, right? So this is one way of raising funds, mainly through organized crime. Next, extortion. Extortion is the biggest business of most insurgent groups in India, be it Northeast insurgents or be it Naxals. They threaten local industrialists, local businesses, even local politicians. They have to pay them a ransom. Hafta is collected from them, weekly or monthly. They have to pay a bribe, or else they will target them. They'll kidnap them, torture them. If required, they'll even kill them. I'll tell you something very interesting. It highlights the corrupt nexus as well between politicians and extremists. There have been cases in Naxal areas where one politician has hired Naxals and used them to threaten his political opponent. Let's say elections are coming. A politician is contesting MLA or MP election. He doesn't want any competition. He wants to win. He will pay a bribe to Naxals. He'll build a contact with them. He'll pay them money, a very good amount of money. The Naxals will threaten the opponent, forcing him not to contest or forcing him to ensure he will lose the election so that the other guy wins. Such corrupt nexuses also have been noticed. Politicians getting involved with Naxals. This is basically contract or supari killings, right, which has been noticed in this area. So these are the channels through which they raise money. Plus, they can get donations. There could be Naxal sympathizers around the country who sympathize with their ideology. They themselves may not be interested in getting involved in this war, but they might give them financial support, legal support, etc. There could be intellectuals, lawyers, students, professors, or anyone from any part of the country, right, who sympathize with Naxal ideology and the cause. Let's say there is a left-wing radical, right? He or she personally, they don't want to get involved in the war, but they sympathize and they give funds. They donate regularly, or they give legal and even maybe global support, diplomatic support to bring their issue at the global level. So this could also exist where Naxal sympathizers give donations and funds and all other support needed. There has been external state involvement from Pakistan and China. But again, as I told you, it is very limited. Please write this down. There has been external involvement, but very limited involvement. Not much. We have intelligence to show that in the past, Naxals had ties with Pakistan's ISI, with Chinese intelligence. They've got funds. They have helped Naxals build contacts with other groups. So some support is there, but it's not a major support. So Naxalism is largely homegrown, it's largely domestic, but these are the various financing routes. Now, where are they getting the weapons from? One, they use the money they are raising to procure advanced weapons from arms traffickers. As I told you, they have connections with other insurgent groups, terror groups, and criminal organizations. So by using the money they are raising, they will spend a part of it to raise advanced weapons, assault rifles, rocket propelled grenades, right? They learn advanced bomb making skills, explosives. Some of it is being procured from the global arms trafficking cartels. Next, another primary source, they steal, they loot. From where? From the police and from our security forces itself. That is why they attack police stations. They attack security camps. They know that armories are present. Large scale weapons are stored by the security forces and the police. So they attack and they steal the weapons. Following the ambush attack, after they kill few police officers and security forces, right, they will loot the weapons from them. So stealing and looting weapons is another major source where our own weapons are stolen by the Naxals and they use it against us. Another cheaper route is to rely on local gun factories. In the criminal belt of UP, Bihar, Nepal, there are many illegal gun making factories. They make these country guns. If you have seen Mirzapur, right, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's a very real world depiction again. The gang wars, the gang fights, the gangsters of UP, Bihar, who also have influence in the Nepal belt, in the Terai belt, they all rely on some local guns. Sometimes they don't even work properly, they'll backfire. So they're produced in these illegal gun making factories. They're very cheap, right? Easy to mass produce. So they procure these local guns as well from this belt, from UP, Bihar, Nepal belt. So these are the different routes through which they are procuring weapons. One is from arms traffickers, where they get advanced weapons, right, including advanced communication gadgets like satellite phones, GPS kits, etc. They steal weapons from our own forces and they rely on local country-made guns as well. So having this knowledge is very important. Understood? So now we come to the last part, the human rights angle. The human rights angle in this conflict. We'll discuss this. We'll wrap it up. I'll take all your questions, your doubts. I'll show you some PYQs as well. So this is the last part of the discussion. We'll end this module now. In any conflict zone, the human rights situation is a major concern. Now, why should we be bothered about human rights? It is extremely critical because we live in a constitutional democracy where fundamental rights are guaranteed, where right to life is a fundamental right under Article 21. In any case, in any context, we cannot have our security forces misusing their powers or abusing the powers to carry out fake encounters or rapes and molestations or kidnapping and torture. This is inexcusable. Is that clear? See, in any conflict zone, civilians are the ones who will get caught in between. Be it in Jammu and Kashmir, in Northeast India, in Naxal corridor, or in any conflict zone in the world. It's the innocent civilians who get trapped. On one side, there are extremists who have destabilized the region with their violence. They themselves will be targeting local civilians sometimes. They are a threat to the locals. They force them to support them sometimes. All right? Naxals, for example, they've threatened local villagers. They come weekly or monthly to collect food, to collect rations and some money from them. And sometimes forcefully they live in their houses to hide. If locals don't support them, they'll kill them or threaten them. So this is common practice. And if they believe someone is a police informant, they'll kill the civilians as well. So extremists themselves are the biggest human right violators. Through their violence, through their attacks, they are already carrying out large-scale human right violations. Right? They're killing our security forces, which is also a human right violation. Right? But at the same time, we can't have a situation where our forces are carrying out human right violations, be it local civilians or be it an extremist or a terrorist. It is very crucial for the forces to remain extremely professional. Why? You might ask, sir, these guys are committing so much violence. What is wrong if our forces target them and abuse the powers? Let them punish, let them suffer. Right? Some of you might argue that way. Let me tell you why this is wrong, why this could backfire. It's not in our own interest. If our forces are seen to be committing large-scale human right violations, it will create a bigger divide between the state and the local people. See, thankfully, Indian forces are largely professional, be it Indian Army in J&K or in Northeast India, be it CRPF, the CAPFs, and to an extent even state police. They are largely professional forces by and large. They are well trained, they are sensitized, they understand the constitution, they are taught about fundamental rights, they are taught about the legal consequences. Right? If any encounter happens, there will be investigations. There will be inquiries which happen. If any suspicion comes up, they know that there will be further inquiries and they could be held guilty and punished quite severely. So this system is essential. The accountability system, having checks and balances on your forces is critical. So by and large, our forces are professional forces, right? But there could be some rogue officers who misuse their powers and abuse the law. They abuse the powers given to them. This has occurred quite frequently in our conflict zones, particularly in the Naxal corridor. There have been many cases where, for example, let's say Naxals have carried out an attack. They have killed few soldiers. Now the whole unit will be angry because they have lost their brothers, their friends. So they'll be craving for revenge. It's obvious, it's human to understand that emotion. So the local unit, which lost its brothers and friends, they would be extremely angry and they want to hit this Naxal unit. Fine, justified. But in this process, very often what they do is the local units, they target the local villagers where the attack happened. If they have some information that locals have given help to them, they'll target the local villagers trying to extract information from them as to who are these Naxals, where they were hiding, did they give any support to them. They target the men in the houses. Sometimes they pick up all the men. They don't even report the arrest. They are taken secretly, right? That's kidnapping essentially, and sometimes tortured for information. There have been instances, documented evidences, where rapes and molestations have been carried out against women. Because in a conflict zone, using rape becomes a sexual weapon. Committing such sexual offenses becomes a weapon of oppression. Right? It's happened in many conflict areas around the world. Terrorist extremists have done it. Some rogue security forces also have done it. In Naxal corridor itself, there are investigations done by media outlets, credible investigating agencies, and even by judicial commissions, where initial evidence has been found that rapes and molestations have happened, kidnappings and tortures have been committed, and sometimes fake encounters. They will know that he is not an extremist, still they will kill that person, brand him as an Naxal. Why? They'll get rewards, they'll get promotions, right? So there could be a wrong motivation. The integrity of the officer might be wrong. Driven by rewards and promotions, they might carry out fake killings, or just by driven by revenge because of an attack. They might target locals, or even, let's say, Naxal is apprehended. The law has to take the course. You can open fire and kill extremists only when you are under fire. If someone is surrendering, the security forces can't kill the extremist just because they are extremists, right? So many such cases happen quite regularly. Either civilians or extremists. Sometimes they might suffer at the hands of our security forces. This is where the government has to be impartial. It has to be transparent. If genuine cases come up with prima facie evidence, we have to investigate them thoroughly and ensure that the guilty officers are punished. At the same time, we can't do this in every case. What if fake allegations are brought up just to target our forces? Because in such a difficult conflict environment, our forces need some protection as well. For every encounter, for every conflict, if there is an inquiry investigation going into the details of the inquiry of the encounter, then forces will lose their motivation, their morale to fight this war. So we need to find that balance. In cases where allegations come up, if there is some prima facie evidence, then independent inquiries have to be done. Government has to allow that to happen. Government has to give permissions, ensure independent commissions, judicial bodies look into it. And we have to get into the depth of the case. And if wrongdoing is detected, we should not spare those officers because they bring a bad name to the entire force. The CRPF, Indian Army, they are very professional forces, right? They maintain their integrity. But few bad officers, rogue officers here and there, they bring a bad name to the entire force, and this creates a divide. The locals will hate the security forces after this. You can never win the trust back, the faith, and the war will continue. The violence will continue. It will benefit the extremists. Now, those who are affected, they'll go join the extremists to fight the state. We don't want that situation. It creates a vicious cycle of violence. So the state has a bigger responsibility than the extremists. Extremists are irrational. They have no boundaries, no constraints, but we can't do that. The state has to be rational, bound by the constitution, by the law, and we have to enforce this strictly on the security forces. I'll come back to this discussion later as well when we discuss Northeast India, discuss Jammu and Kashmir, right? We'll talk about AFSPA as well. So I will come back to this discussion, but I think for now it is enough. Ensuring that there are no human right violations is critical. Even if there are cases, we have to investigate and punish the rogue officers. Strict punishment has to be given. You have to make an example out of them so that no one ever dares repeat the mistake. Is that clear? But at the same time, a degree of protection is also needed. Some immunity is needed to protect the forces from fake complaints, fake allegations. Unfortunately, that is missing in India. Right? Later, we'll discuss AFSPA tomorrow and in the next weekend. We will talk about Northeast India, J&K, and AFSPA. This discussion will come back. Right? Unfortunately, there are shortcomings in the case of India to deal with such human right violations. Recently, there has been a horrific incident in Jammu and Kashmir. There was a terror attack just 3 weeks back in December. Following this attack, a local army unit has targeted local civilians. 8 people were picked up for an investigation, and 3 of them were dead. They had torture marks on their body. Other 5 who survived, they have been in critical condition. And clearly, there is a prima facie case that some rogue Indian Army officers have committed a serious act of violation. The defense minister, the army chief, they have publicly acknowledged this, and they have clearly demanded the officers, the Indian Army, to behave professionally. This is a horrific incident. Yes, the terror attack was brutal. India lost its soldiers. They were martyred, correct. But there is an element of professionalism in the way we fight terrorism. In the name of fighting terrorism, you can't target civilians, commit tortures and killings. So this incident in J&K, which happened just few days back, right? Clearly, there is prima facie evidence. The army chief, defense minister have almost acknowledged that yes, wrong things have happened. We will fix this. We will ensure punishment is given to these rogue officers, right? Investigations are going on. So such transparency is needed from the state. When there is a clear case where violations have happened, we should not hide it. Generally, what governments do is that because of the political backlash, right, they try to cover up the case, or they don't allow investigations to happen. They don't give the permissions. But the transparency is necessary. As we have seen in the recent case, the transparency is needed from the forces, from the government as well. Now, in the Naxal corridor, there is one issue related to something called Salwa Judum. I don't know if you've heard about it. Salwa Judum was a private militia, a private armed group, which was raised by a local politician in Chhattisgarh. In Chhattisgarh, there was a a very infamous, controversial politician. So in the name of fighting Naxalism, he started this initiative of arming a local tribe, giving weapons in the hands of a local tribe to make them a private security force. Later, they were supported by the Chhattisgarh state police. The Chhattisgarh government officially supported this private army called Salva Judum. A local tribe called the Koya tribe. They were recruited. They were given the designation of Koya Commando. They were given the tag of special police officers without any training, without any sensitization. And they were given the mandate to kill Naxals. Now, again, some of you might ask, what's wrong with this? Isn't this a great strategy of using local people who are favoring the government? What's wrong in giving weapons to them and targeting the extremists? Let me tell you why this is wrong. In a constitutional democracy, you can't have private armies. You can't have private militias. Then why on earth do you have police forces and security forces? That is the job of the state. Private militias are not trained. They're not educated. They don't understand Article 21, which is right to life. They don't understand that only the state has the authority to take someone's life, that too after following the procedure established by law. They don't understand the consequences. And worst part was they were rewarded. Rewards were given to them for every Naxal they killed. In many cases, do you know what they did? The Koya commandos, the so-called Koya commandos or special police officers, they had full support from politicians and from the state police. They were giving weapons to them, right? And they would earn a reward as well if they killed someone. They would kill anyone, usually their rivals, with whom they had personal rivalries, and brand them as a Naxal. Put a weapon in their hand, dress them up as a Naxal, kill them, and show that they have killed a Naxal and claim rewards. This practice led to serious human rights violations in Chhattisgarh. This is what happens when you raise private militias. A democratic government cannot be raising and funding private militias. It is completely unconstitutional. So this practice went on for a few years, and many allegations came up in Chhattisgarh regarding the gross human rights violations committed by the so-called Koya commandos. Finally, a case was filed by Nandini Sundar, who is a very prominent civil society activist, human rights activist. She's also the wife of Siddharth Varadarajan, a very popular journalist. He was with the Hindu before. Now he heads The Wire, which is a digital news portal. So his wife, Nandini Sundar, who's a human rights activist, a civil society activist, fought a legendary case at the Supreme Court. The case reached the Supreme Court, and in 2011, in the Nandini Sundar versus State of Chhattisgarh, the Supreme Court declared Salva Judum as unconstitutional. The Supreme Court belted the Chhattisgarh police and the government that how on earth can a democratic government sponsor a private militia? How can you give weapons to local tribe members, ask them to kill Naxals and reward them? That is the job of the police. If you're outsourcing the war, why on earth do you have police forces and security forces? Right? Because there will be no checks and balances. If police forces violate the law, investigations can happen. They can be held accountable. They can be punished. Tomorrow, if Koya commandos are doing the violations, how will you hold them accountable? Right? They're not responsible enough. So Supreme Court was very critical of this practice and clearly struck down Salva Judum as illegal, declared it as unconstitutional, and ordered Chhattisgarh to disband Salva Judum. All right? So Salva Judum officially doesn't exist anymore. But there are some disturbing reports. There have been few reports that Salva Judum continues secretly. Officially doesn't exist. Because of the Supreme Court orders, it clearly declared this as illegal, unconstitutional. Chhattisgarh government disbanded Salva Judum. All right? But there have been disturbing reports in the last few years that the practice is continuing, but secretly. Secretly, state police are backing some local tribes to go and target Naxals. Is that clear? So this is a very controversial subject. We will discuss the same issue again when we come to Jammu and Kashmir. In J&K, there is a similar practice, very similar to it, but slightly different. We will discuss that. It's part of current affairs as well. We'll discuss that under Jammu and Kashmir. So with this, I complete the discussion on Naxalism and linkages between development and extremism. We have covered all the topics. Trust me, this is more than enough. Apart from this, all you have to do is follow current affairs. Any article in Hindu and Indian Express related to Naxalism, please read about it. Watch the Hindu analysis, the webinars, read the paper on your own. Make notes from that. It's enough. It's more than enough. Got it? Any new initiative, any new development, new attacks by Naxals, any new strategy, please make a note. Just few points. Add it to your notes. That's it. You're done. This whole chapter is done. The best part is this is again an essay topic. It's an essay material. There could be an essay on Naxalism, linkages between development and extremism. You can write a beautiful essay on this topic, right? So now, let me end the discussion. I'll take all your questions, all your doubts. We'll spend some time on it, and then we'll discuss a couple of previous questions. In the meantime, go through the PYQs. I've given some questions that were asked in previous mains. It's all related to Naxalism. Go through that. I'll discuss a couple of them. I'll give you an idea about answer writing, and I'll also take your doubts and questions. So go through the questions in the meantime. Even I will look at your doubts and I'll start answering them one by one. Kanchana says, sounds very scary, sir. I know. See, I told you, I'm not trying to scare you, right? This is the challenge. This is the beauty of the job. Be it a IAS officer, IPS officer, or any of the civil services. They are very challenging. Of course, there are threats, there are risks, but that is the beauty of the job. That is why so many people aspire for this examination, right? But of course, you will get enough training. You'll have your security. You'll understand how to operate in these difficult environments. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but that is the challenge. That's the best way to serve the nation, right? To not just deal with the threat, but also to deal with the development of these backward areas. Karan is asking, what is PWG? Then Karan, I think you didn't attend the previous session. So please go back and watch. PWG is People's War Group, one of the Naxal outfits that was operating in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana. Nikhil says, is it not self-defeating move to use IPS officers for IB and draw, as their identity is already in the public domain even before they enter the agency? That's a fantastic point, Nikhil. You identified a core issue in our intelligence agencies. See, I'll just give you an idea here. Actually, it's not part of this chapter, but it will come later. We'll discuss IB and draw. But since you have raised the issue, I'll just have a small word on it. Intelligence officers, they are supposed to function in a covert manner. For them, their identity is everything. Their actual identity should never become public. The moment their identity is exposed, they can no longer be an intelligence officer. That is how the service is built, right? Now, if you look at foreign intelligence agencies like CIA, MI6 of Britain, even ISI for that matter, Mossad of Israel, the SVR of Russia, right? The Chinese intelligence, they are so careful in their recruitment. The officers they recruit, right? They recruit them at a very young age, usually from college campuses. They conduct open exams, just like us, but the recruitment is secret. No one will get to know as to who has joined the CIA, who has joined Mossad. That is how secretively they operate. Now compare this with India. Look at how IB and DRAW make their recruitments. It's a joke. In today's world, you can't have such recruitment into intelligence agencies. Do you know how IB and DRAW recruits? It recruits from existing services. Those who clear this exam, UPSC Civil Services exam, your names are in the public domain. The moment you clear prelims, you clear mains, you go to the interview, you finally crack the exam. Throughout the process, your identity is right available in the public domain. It's everywhere on the internet. Tomorrow, IB Raw recruits from the same list, right? From the probationers, some are drawn into IB and Raw from the initial stages. Later, IPS officers and other service officers as well, they enter parallelly on deputation. Their identities are already public. Their photos, their profile, their whole family details are available in the public domain, and they go and join IB and Raw. So this is complete lack of planning and very poor strategy on India's part. Our many intelligence operations have been exposed very easily by foreign governments because they already know most of our intelligence officers who are working in intelligence agencies. Why? Their identity is already public. This is where we have to reform our intelligence agencies, our recruitment process. We are struggling to do that. There are many reasons behind it. I'll discuss that when we come to IB and Raw. But what Nikhil has said is absolutely right. If you're recruiting civil servants, existing officers from various cadres, from various security forces, even from paramilitary, from Indian Army, officers are directly taken on deputation. Problem is their identity is already known. It's very easy for a foreign agency to find out which of them are working for IB and Raw. Once your identity is compromised, the whole operation is compromised. So this is a critical flaw we have in India, which has not been fixed for decades. So there are problems in recruitment. There are problems in the way IB and Raw are structured, right? We will discuss this briefly in the last chapter. Kanchana is asking, please explain NTRO. NTRO is a Technical Intelligence Agency of India, the National Technical Research Organization. It specializes in electronic interception. It will intercept satellite communication, the whole internet, mobile, telecom communication. Any form of electronic communication can be intercepted by NTRO. It also has access to the spy satellites of India launched by ISRO. It operates a fleet of drones as well for aerial intelligence. So all forms of electronic interception comes under NTRO. Nikhil is asking, those who target children in schools, are they terrorists or insurgents? See, if any extremist is killing school children, obviously they will be branded as terrorists. Because terrorism is about brutal violence, mindless acts of violence where civilians are harmed, where human rights violations are committed, right? So any extremist group killing school children is a brutal act of terrorism, nothing other than that, right? There have been such incidents happening in some parts of the world where terror groups have targeted school children. Naxals have never targeted school children, they have targeted schools. There's a difference between the two. Naxals have targeted school buildings, that is government infrastructure, public infrastructure. They have not targeted school children. But there are terror groups. For example, in Pakistan, there was a terror group which has killed school children as well. There are a few other groups in Africa which have targeted school children. So those are brutal terrorist organizations. Kola says, sir, Naxals also raise funds from selling sandalwood, elephant tusk, etc. Yes, you're absolutely right. You can add that point as well. Through wildlife trafficking, extremists, they poach, they hunt. For example, in Eastern Ghats, you have a precious wood which is available, the red sandalwood, the red sanders, right, which is also depicted in that popular movie Pushpa as well, right? So there is large-scale poaching of red sanders. It's very valuable in the international black market. So Naxals are also involved in it. Then they hunt and poach animals like elephants for their tusk, tigers and other big animals for their teeth, nails, skin, etc. Right? Because there is a huge wildlife trafficking market, a black market in Southeast Asia, where they fetch a lot of money. So wildlife trafficking is also a source of funding for insurgents and terrorists. Rishabh says, sir, please don't call them rogue officers. Not at all. If an Indian officer has violated human rights, he or she is nothing other than a rogue officer. They will be disbanded by the army itself. Please don't have any wrong sympathies for officers who are committing human rights violations. This is called fake patriotism. This is called fake nationalism. In the name of nationalism, in the name of supporting the army, don't support rogue officers. There is a difference. I told you, Indian army is very professional. Our security forces are very professional. I'm not at all questioning their integrity. I have great respect for them. I'm highlighting that in every statement. But rogue officers who commit violations cannot be spared. You can't use any other word for them. They are rogue officers. Once evidence is proven, right? That's what I'm saying. Once they are held guilty, that's when they become rogue officers. They will be punished. They have been punished in the past. Indian army itself will throw them out, disband them, try them in military tribunals and give very strict punishments to them. Some have been tried in the judiciary as well, right? So you cannot have your state forces committing human rights violations at any cost. If any officer has done it, they are nothing but rogue officers. That's the right word to use. There's nothing wrong in that. Himanshu is asking, what's the main purpose of paramilitary forces other than coin operations? See, paramilitary forces, they're also used in border security and border management, like BSF, SSB, Assam Rifles, etc. They're used in election management. During elections, your paramilitary forces play a big role. They provide security. They are used in disaster management, right? And they are used in counter-insurgency, counter-terror operations if required. So paramilitary forces are very versatile. They perform many different roles. Gaurav is asking, sir, who are urban Naxals? This is one regular question I get, very popular question. Who are urban Naxals? I'm sure you would have heard about the term on social media. Now, please don't use this term. It's not an official term used by the government of India. This is a derogatory term used on social media by some of the right-wing supporters of the government to label the critics, the opponents of the government, as urban Naxals. Student activists, civil society activists, intellectuals, journalists, whoever is questioning the government, criticizing the government, right? They have been labeled as urban Naxals on social media. This is a political propaganda. Don't fall for it. Why am I telling this? I'm telling this because Home Ministry informed the parliament on the floor of the house in the Lok Sabha. A question was raised by a MP. Does the government use the designation urban Naxal for anyone? The Home Ministry said no. There is nothing called urban Naxal. We don't use this designation at all. Is that clear? The correct word to use is a Naxal sympathizer. For any radical ideology, there could be sympathizers. Even in Jammu and Kashmir, in Punjab, in Northeast India, in the Naxal corridor, there could be sympathizers who sympathize with the ideology and give some kind of support. There is a different way of tackling with them, right? Be it direct support or indirect support that sympathizers are giving. We have a mechanism. Our forces, our agencies deal with them as well because they are also extremists. By backing insurgents and terrorists through funds, donations, and support, they are encouraging extremism against India. So they are also extremists. We deal with them legally. But there is nothing called urban Naxals, or government officially doesn't use this designation. This is a social media invention, a political campaign, a propaganda to largely target the critics of the government. Anyone questioning the government is blindly labeled as an urban Naxal. It's a derogatory term actually. Please don't use it. Home Ministry itself has said we don't use this designation and we find this objectionable. Is that clear? This was on the floor of the house in the parliament. So officially there's nothing called an urban Naxal. This is just a social media invention. It's a political propaganda. So drop it. Don't use it. What is the aim of Khalistan? I'll come to it. Don't worry. You're jumping ahead. Tomorrow we'll discuss Khalistan movement. Kola says, sir, I've seen the Veerappan documentary in Z5 recently. Instead, watch the one on Netflix. That's even better. And by the way, Veerappan was not a insurgent. Many people have a confusion. I get this question as well. Sir, Veerappan was he a terrorist? Was he an insurgent? He was neither. He was a bandit, a dacoit, right? He was hunting elephants, poaching the wildlife, smuggling sandalwood. He's a classic criminal, hiding from the law, hiding in the forests of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. So Veerappan was a dacoit, a bandit, not an insurgent, not a terrorist. All right. Ketan is asking, sir, can a IPS work as an undercover in other countries without informing the department? It can't happen without informing the department, obviously. But of course, IPS officers who are deputed with RAW, right, who are involved in RAW's intelligence operations, they will work abroad. They will be sent abroad undercover. They will function undercover under false identities to conceal their real identity. But they can't do that without RAW's approval, right? Without RAW's clear permissions and clear instructions, no such illegal operations can be run. Even if it is done, that is absolutely illegal, and the government will act against it. Pooja says, sir, I'm not clear about COIN. COIN is nothing. COIN is short form for counterinsurgency. All right. When security operations are conducted to counter an insurgent group in the border areas, in the forest areas, we call it counterinsurgency operations. So I write it as a short form because writing the whole thing takes time. So COIN operations, it's actually a proper short form as well, even used by security forces. So it expands to stand for counterinsurgency operations. That's it. All right. So guys, these are some questions. Now let's look at a couple of mains questions, and I think after that we can end the session for today. Because I don't want to start the next module, because if I start, problem is we won't be able to end on time. Like each topic will take a certain amount of time. I don't want to rush through. Tomorrow we'll start with the next module. Now let's look at a couple of questions. I'll explain the approach to answer writing, and then we'll end the session for today. Look at this question from 2013, from the first mains paper after the subject was introduced, after the new syllabus was introduced. The question says Article 244 of Indian Constitution relates to administration of scheduled and tribal areas. Analyze the impact of non-implementation of provisions of 5th schedule on the growth of left-wing extremism. Now see, first I'll give you some generic points about answer writing. Then I will explain how to tackle such questions. Initially, the question might look complicated. Some of you might even ask, sir, what is this? You didn't even mention Article 244, right? You didn't even discuss 5th schedule. What is this question? It's not even related to internal security, right? I'll explain that. I'll come to it. First, how do you approach answer writing? Always pay attention to the question, understand the question. It might seem obvious, but trust me, many students, they don't do this. Because in the hurry and under the pressure and tension of the examination, many students, they quickly glance the question without reading it carefully, understanding it carefully. They only catch the keywords. Now, in this question, for example, if you don't read it carefully, just a glance, if you just glance through the question, obviously Article 244 will stand out. 5th schedule, left-wing extremism will stand out, and you'll start writing some answer. You'll explain what is Article 244, what is 5th schedule, what is left-wing extremism. You might define Naxalism, explain Maoism as well. All the points might be right, but you will not get a single mark if you do that. Why? Because the question is not asking you to explain Article 244. It's not asking you to explain 5th schedule in detail. It's not asking you to explain Maoist doctrine. What you write might be correct, because every mains aspirant will have a lot of knowledge. They would have covered every subject. They would have a lot of information. Just because you have information, and if you dump it on your answer sheet without reading the question, you'll not get marks. So what does UPSC expect? This is not your college exam, your school or university exam, where you mug up something, reproduce that, and get marks. It doesn't work that way. Those who rely on rote learning will never clear this exam. Why? Because this is an analytical examination. Prelims is different. That's an elimination round. It's an MCQ round. But mains, it requires descriptive answer writing. Mains is a different challenge altogether. Again, I'm not discouraging you. If you don't believe me, watch 12th fail. You'll understand where the aspirant goes wrong. Clearing prelims is a different ball game. Clearing mains is a different ball game altogether. And you cannot clear mains without practicing answer writing. You need rigorous practice, regular, consistent practice. This is a skill. It's an art that you develop. Nobody is born with a natural talent to write good answers, because writing essay type descriptive answers, it takes effort. It's only through effort that you can cultivate the skill and the art, right? You can't do this when the exam is close by. You can't do this after prelims. It has to start now. Let's say you're planning 2025 attempt or 2024 attempt. Answer writing is something that should happen consistently, almost on a daily basis. Is that clear? What I would suggest is that every day, pick 2 questions from what you have studied in that day. Let's say you attended one class, you saw the Hindu analysis, you read some current affairs, maybe you read your optional subject as well for 1 hour. From whatever you have studied from the day till the end of night, before you hit the bed, before you go to sleep, just keep 15 minutes aside and take 2 questions from what you have studied. Not some random question, specifically from a topic that you have studied that day. In Hindu analysis, we give you a practice question. There are previous questions available from previous papers, or you can make your own question. It's not very difficult. From whatever you study, make 2 questions, one current affairs, maybe one static question, and write an answer. How should you write? You have to simulate the examination condition. You can't copy. You can't open a textbook, open a website, and then write a well-crafted answer. That's not an answer. You can't take 1 hour to write one answer. You have to stick to exam conditions. In the exam, you will get 7 to 9 minutes to write an answer. For 10-mark question, for 150 words, you will get around 7 minutes, roughly 7.5. For 15 marks question, 250 words or 200 words, you will get around 9 minutes, not more than that. If you write an answer for 25 minutes, you will never complete the paper. Correct? If you copy from the internet, if you open books and just replicate what is there, you're not going to get marks. You have to start writing on your own. Initially, I know it's difficult. It's very challenging. It's tough. You don't know how to start, how to begin. But trust me on this. Don't worry. Initially, don't think. Don't judge yourself before you even attempt. From whatever you have studied that day, right? Whether you have understood everything or not, take a question and start writing. Initially, your answers will be bad. First 1 month or 2 months, your answers will be bad. Trust me, it's good for you. You will learn. You will start identifying where you can improve. Do this regularly, 15 minutes every day. That's it, 2 questions. Do it only Monday to Friday at least, 5 days a week. Then see where you will stand 3 months later. Whenever possible, get your answers corrected from your peers, your friends, or from our mentors. Right? Anyone who can help you, get your answers corrected. Right? Sometimes, if you don't have anyone, you can do correction yourself. Later, the next day, open your answers, go through it. See whether independently you can evaluate your answer. You can do it. It all takes practice. 1 month is difficult, I understand. 2 months will be difficult. But do this regularly. After 3 months, your answers will start improving. Now, how do you approach? What to do? The UPSC notification is our key. UPSC notification tells us what answers to write, what kind of answers to write. UPSC says that your answers have to be direct. You can't beat around the bush. You can't write unnecessary points. There is a strict time limit. There is a word limit. Don't forget. You don't have the luxury to write essays for every answer. There is a strict word limit. You have to stick to it. Let's say 150 word question. If you write, let's say 130 words, 170 words, it's fine. They'll not be penalizing you just for 10, 15 words here and there. They'll not sit and count every word. But if you're writing only 50 words for 150 words answer, if you're writing 500 words for a 150 word answer, evaluator will get to know that you're not able to keep your answer concise. The notification clearly says, go through the syllabus, come to the main section, you will see UPSC says that it wants direct, concise answers. which means you have to stick to your word limit and time limit. Next, there should be a logical flow of thought. You can't write random points in some order. The points have to be organized. There should be a structure. You can't simply rant about everything that you know. Again, it's not your university exam where you might get half mark or 3 marks. Doesn't work like that. You have to maintain a solid structure, an introduction, a body, a conclusion. And in this answer, there should be logical flow of thought. From one point to another, there should be consistent flow of thought. Let's say I begin my answer with a certain opinion. I have to stick to that opinion till the end in the conclusion. And I have to give examples, I have to give substantiating arguments in the body to back up my opinion. I can't take one stand in the introduction and contradict myself in the conclusion. I can't do that. That is not logical. Let's say UPSC is asking, do you support, just for example, do you support integrated action plan? Do you think it was a success? Let's say in introduction, I'll write integrated action plan was a great scheme. It was very successful. But in the conclusion, I contradict myself. I'll say that it didn't have any results. It stopped in 2 years. That is not logical. I'm saying something else in the introduction, saying something else in the conclusion. So the stand I take is very crucial. The opinion I'm expressing is crucial. What you say in introduction should continue through the conclusion as well. You can be critical. Present both sides of the argument, pros and cons. In every topic, there will be pros and cons, right? Highlight the positives, highlight the negatives, present a way forward, give a suggestion. But in this entire structure, there should be logical flow. Got it? So here in this question, right? Let's say you want to give an introduction. You can talk about 5th schedule and Article 244. This is where you bring your polity knowledge. I told you, subject is connected with other subjects. In polity, you would have studied 5th schedule. I briefly explained what is 5th schedule as well. Article 244 is related to it. It deals with the scheduled tribal areas in the country and tribal welfare in the country. In the introduction, you can briefly introduce what is Article 244. Don't go into the details. Don't explain what are scheduled areas. President notifies it. Governor has these powers. Not needed. Question is not asking that. If you write that, you're wasting your time, you're wasting word limit, you will not get marks for that, even if the points are correct. So write about Article 244, how it is connected to tribal welfare, tribal development. In 2 sentences, you can bring that out. 5th schedule of the Constitution. This is the provision there which is present, which is meant for tribal welfare and development. That's enough. Now, in the body, talk about its implementation. How has the implementation been? This is where you bring your polity knowledge, right? Where you have studied whether 5th schedule is fully successful or not. There are few shortcomings in 5th schedule areas. The welfare councils, the tribal welfare councils are not functioning very well. Elections are not held properly. Panchayat system has not been extended. Local governance has suffered. Tribal welfare has not been focused upon. So mention some of those points in the body. The idea is to highlight that even though we have this constitutional provision, it has not been fully implemented. It's not been effectively implemented. So this has affected development in tribal areas. That is the conclusion I'm trying to arrive at. This is the core point. I don't have to do anything else. One small line about 5th schedule and Article 244, how it's connected to tribal welfare, and how implementation has been little flawed. How there are shortcomings in its implementation. So immediately after this in the body, I will link this with lack of development in the tribal areas. This is the core point, because question is about extremism. From here, I will talk about how this has contributed to rise of left-wing extremism. The poor implementation of these constitutional guarantees has led to poor administration, poor development, derailment of justice for tribal communities. This has become a rallying point for rise of left-wing extremism. Maoists have exploited the lack of welfare and development in tribal belts, and they've managed to radicalize some tribal communities and get local support to wage this war against India. Give examples. If you're aware of any tribal community suffering from developmental issues, right? You can give an example here. For example, Dongria Kond in Odisha, the Niyamgiri hills where they are found, was supposed to be given away to a mining company. Vedanta Group was winning the license to mine bauxite from Niyamgiri hills. But Dongria Kond tribe, which was affected, they fought a Supreme Court case with the help of lawyers and activists, and they blocked the mining project. There are many examples, many such land acquisition projects, forest conservation projects, mining projects, which have affected tribal communities. You can briefly talk about how such issues affect their welfare, their culture, their land, their resources. This becomes a resentment factor which is exploited by extremists, giving rise to Naxalism. Right? So that is your body. Then conclude the answer. In the conclusion, talk about what can be done or what has been done. How we can improve the implementation of fifth schedule. How we can provide better tribal welfare in the country. Talk about the development initiatives. Give example of integrated action plan. Right? Integrated action plan was meant to focus on fifth schedule areas and to address the poor implementation. So talk about that. Give an example. Give a suggestion from your side how you can improve welfare and governance in tribal areas. That's it. Your answer is done. I know initially it seems a little complicated, but this comes with practice. That's why I told you, do it regularly. You have to be consistent. There's no other way. There's no easy approach. There are no shortcuts here. You have to remain consistent. Do it regularly. Just Monday to Friday, 2 questions every day. So 10 questions a week. And down the line, you can take full-length papers. After 5-6 months of practice, you can take full-length papers and start writing. At least 1 paper a week, 2 papers a month. That is enough to improve your answer writing. Then finally, you will take your test series where you write multiple papers. So that is how you improve your answer writing, right? So I think this is enough for today. Go through the other questions. I expect you guys to write answers to this. That is the best way to practice, as I told you. So I think everything is clear. I really hope you have understood everything. I hope you have enjoyed the classes. That is more important. If you enjoy the class and the discussion, automatically you will understand everything. If not everything, at least a good part of it. Then when you revise, everything becomes clear. So that is why I try to build the argument, the discussion like a story. I hope you don't feel it's a waste of time, and I hope you're liking and enjoying the session. Let me know in the comments any changes, any improvements needed, and let's meet tomorrow. Right? Tomorrow will be a long day, Sunday. We will take up the next module, terrorism. We'll discuss basics of terrorism, compare it with insurgency. We will talk about Khalistan movement, Jammu and Kashmir, how India is countering terrorism. All these topics will be discussed tomorrow. So don't miss the class. All right? It's very, very important. So that is it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Have a good night.